and welcome to episode 2 of The Mindful Mic, a podcast from Children's Home Counseling Services that explores the many factors that shape our mental health and connects listeners to the community resources working to make a difference. I'm your host, Colby Twist.
I'm your other host, Grace Shimatsu. The Children's Home is a nonprofit organization in Boise, Idaho that provides counseling and other mental health services to children and their families, regardless of insurance status or ability to pay.
In today's episode, we sit down with one of our incredible clinicians, Savannah Perez. Savannah is a licensed master social worker who has been with the Children's Home for many years.
She specializes in counseling children and adolescents and just brings so much heart to this work. We're really excited to have her with us today.
In our conversation, we discuss the mental health challenges faced by the LGBTQIA+ youth, the importance of affirming care, and how families and communities can create safe, supportive environments.
According to the Trevor Project's 2023 national survey, more than 40% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered suicide in the past year, and rates are even higher among transgender and non-binary youth. But research also shows that just one accepting adult can reduce the risk of suicide by 40%.
We hope this conversation gives parents, caregivers, and the community members some practical ways to show up and support the LGBTQ individuals in their lives, not just during Pride Month, but all year long.
All right, let's chat.
Okay, we have with us Savannah here. And Savannah, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Savannah. I'm one of the clinicians here at Children's Home. I'm an LMSW, originally from San Antonio, Texas, and I'm now here in beautiful Boise. I am one of the clinicians here, so I work with a wide array of populations. I have kiddos as young as 3 and all the way towards the family spectrum. And I like to specialize in trauma, so I work with a lot of trauma and working through healing through trauma experiences and things that families and kids have been through within their lives. I do a lot of art therapy, so I'm pretty big on the holistic therapies. So the art therapy, play therapy. I'm not a registered play therapist, but I do a lot of play therapy techniques and art therapy techniques. I absolutely love what I do, and I'm very passionate about working with my kiddos and their families. And that's how I ended up here. My whole life, I've kind of just loved working with people, and I originally wanted to be a veterinarian, and I moved away from that because I shot at a veterinarian and they opened up a cat, and I realized I couldn't do that. So I am not going to open up a cat. I don't want to do that. So then I ended up thinking, I want to do something that, I can help others and listen to stories and help people through life. And, I really got inspired of wanting to do that. My mom is also a therapist, and so she was kind of a role model for me too, to kind of move forward in the helping profession. So that kind of runs thick in our family of wanting to help and better the lives of humans, because after all, we're all humans just going through life together.
I love that. I'm glad that you changed professions and came here and is doing this, because I've worked with you for quite a few years now.
4 years,
4 years we worked together.
5 years, yeah.
And you're doing exactly what you should be doing. You are just such an asset to the Children's Home. So I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're here today to talk to us about this very important topic that we're gonna get into. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of Pride Month, as you know, so I'd love to just start by asking you, what Pride Month means to you as a mental health professional, and also why it's so important to recognize and talk about LGBTQIA plus mental health during this month and all months of the year.
Yeah, Pride Month is something I think that is just a wonderful, beautiful time period of love and acceptance and individuality, right? And when it comes to mental health, right? I mean, mental health is everybody, right? Everyone's struggling with some sort of part, whether it's, anxiety or depression or, suicide ideation. And in Pride Month, I think it really allows anybody who's a part of the community, whether you're a youth in the community or an adult or an ally that is allied with the community, I think it really allows everyone to be seen. and to be heard and to be a part of something, right? Us being social creatures that we are, all of us as humans, right? We all want to belong to something and know that we're loved and that we're heard and that we do bring something to the greater scheme of things. And I think Pride Month really allows that to be seen for everybody. I think kiddos that are, going through questions about gender or trying to figure out their sexual orientation, I think it allows them to be seen and allows them to see others also who are like them. And I think that's important, is being able to see others that are in this same individual space as you, right? Being able to have that together. So I think that's important in the mental health profession. And Pride Month, I think it's just a beautiful time period. I think, there really is so much love at Pride events, and there really is just like this sort of sense of family at Pride events, where people can just be themselves. And that's what it's about. It's about spreading love. It's about connecting. It's about individuality and appreciating all the different puzzles that we bring to the bigger puzzles, right? With the little pieces that connect the big one. And that's what Pride Month, I think, is about, being able to have that. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And, in the city of Boise, we have our Pride Festival in September instead of June.
Yeah.
And you were there, right, at the last Pride Festival. And I just think it just echoed so much of what you said, that it was just a beautiful environment with so much accepting and belongingness. And it was so neat to see so many nonprofit organizations, corporations, and businesses, and just everyday community members just coming together to just celebrate themselves and our community. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah, spreading the love.
Yeah, I love that we have, Pride Month, and then in September we're also recognizing again. But there's also all those months that it kind of goes quiet,
Yeah.
right? And maybe the celebration seems like it stops, and maybe this community doesn't feel as heard anymore, right? We're not celebrating as much, or we kind of go back to business as usual. So that kind of makes me think about, like, what are the mental health challenges that that the community faces, when we're not doing the celebrating, when we're not like seeing,
when we're
each
not
other.
saying everybody's
here
and look
whatever,
at all of us
right?
are beautiful.
Because we can come out and celebrate during the month, and we can go to the parades and stuff, but then, and we love that, but we also need to make sure to take care of the community outside of those, right? So, like, what are challenges that you see, like, the mental health challenges that you're seeing that they're dealing with?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? Because during Pride Month, it's out there, right? And it's not just one place that you're seeing this. You're seeing this at, other agencies, and, even like just going to the stores, and there's Pride Month stuff out, and there's signs, and right. And it's like, wow, we have this beautiful community, and we're like showing, right? We're showing up for them. And then when that month kind of finishes, it kind of feels like, oh, where did all the Pride things go away? I assure you, it's not gone. In the community, it's still there. Having all of the colors kind of be the signifying, right, of the blending of individualities, right? And so, yeah, there definitely is some unique mental health challenges that people in the community face. I would say, throughout lifespan, right? But especially for our youth in the community, it's easy to kind of feel different, and not exactly the good different that people would want to feel, right? And I use air quotations, which you can't hear me, but I have air quotations. You can't see them, right? But the sort of say that different, right? Not the good different that they start to feel. And there is unique challenges to our LGBTQ youth. One of those is sort of the rhetoric that's happens, right? Rhetoric that happens online, rhetoric that happens even in passing, or at, other types of events that might be rhetoric of, you don't belong here, or there's something wrong with you. And that is extremely damaging to our youth, right? We're talking about kiddos who are still in their developmental phase, right? They're developing. I mean, we're all sort of learning throughout life, right? But once we become into adults, we've kind of solidified in who we are, and we may be in that place where it's like, I don't care what this person thinks, or I don't care what that person thinks, because I love to wear socks with sandals, right? We have that, right? We have that feeling as adults. But for our youth, right, they're still developing, and they still want to, whether they say it or not, be a part of something, right? They want to feel connected. They want to feel like they matter, right? And so I think with, rhetoric that happens around the world can be very damaging sometimes many times to our children who are in the community. We also have children who are ostracized or sort of, kicked out by family once they come out, right? And the coming out process is an extremely vulnerable process that children and anybody who goes through, right? Having to come out and kind of speak, their truth and who they are. And sometimes that's not very well received by families, right? And you have children that are pushed out from families, that are treated differently by their family, even though they're the exact same person they were 2 seconds ago before you knew this new label, right? They're pushed out by family members. And so what that does to, a child's mental health is, makes them feel like I'm broken, right? Something's wrong with me. It increases depression, and then it increases the suicide ideation, right? So kiddos that are in the community and that are not accepted, and that are sort of disowned by their family, right? Which is one of the hardest things, because family is like the very beginning part of our socialization, right? We're little, we grow up, and we're a part of this family. This is our social piece. This is our little home, right? Again, being social creatures, right? That's our little home. And when that is damaged, now you have a child that's like, where do I belong? Right? Where is my social family now? Where's my peace? Right? And so that is a challenge that LGBTQ youth face in our community, being ostracized and having a rise in depression and a rise in suicide ideation and, higher risk of completing suicide. That does happen. And then also kind of feeling very isolated, right? They may not feel like they can talk about things that they would want to talk about, right? They feel like they can't really 100% be themselves sometimes, right? And I think that's really hard.
Yeah, I think that those are all such great points. And I think we hear a lot in conversations, and we'll talk about this more later on, but what parents and friends can do to create a more accepting environment for LGBTQ youth. But I'm wondering, in your sessions with clients, or when you're talking to community members, what advice do you give those individuals who have been ostracized by their families or who are struggling to feel accepted? How do you help them to empower themselves?
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought. Because that is a tough thing, right? When children and even just you have adult family members that, finally kind of come to the coming out phase and they're adults, and now they've been cut off by family or friends that have been in their lives forever, right? And it's a really hard thing to kind of have that pushed out happen. For our youth, the biggest thing is helping them know that they are loved, they are true to themselves, and they are supported by a wider array of people, right? Even though their immediate kind of social network may not be, they are supported by many. And connecting them with places where they can go to be around other LGBTQ youth, or to be, in LGBTQ empowering programs, like that is sort of that way of, well, if we don't have your immediate support system be your family, how can we find you another support system, right? One thing that you'll hear a lot in the LGBT community is, your chosen family. And that's a big thing, right? Because as we're growing, right, and those of us in the community, it's kind of really hard to be like, well, where do we go, right? And so it allows them to kind of create these connections with other people and choose who their family is going to be, right? And maybe it's friends. You see people at Pride, with the mom hugs or the dad hugs, right? And that really does mean a lot to a lot of youth who don't have that acceptance at home, right? And you get to have that there. So that chosen family, trying to connect them with places that they can go to feel empowered, and also helping them understand different viewpoints, I think, is an important thing too, right? Because of course we're all individuals in the world and we don't all agree on the same things or have the same perspectives, and helping youth kind of understand that there is other perspectives that their loved ones may be coming with, and it's more so where their loved one is at, not necessarily that something is wrong with them. And so trying to help them look at that in a different lens, right? That it's not that something's wrong with you that your family cannot accept. It's that there is, A, B, and C that has been kind of taught or conditioned to your family members throughout life that allows them to not be there the way you need them to be, and kind of helping them, see that it's not them that's the cause of this, right? They're not broken. They're not the problem. It's just different perspectives and mindsets, right? And sometimes parents, that's another kind of category, but parents do need some time to process and, to process and look at, what this means for them, right? And sometimes you'll have parents that are very unsupportive, and then a switch happens in a couple of months and all of a sudden they're supportive, right? And so it's kind of just this buffering period that happens. And when that happens, it's a beautiful thing. Sometimes it doesn't. But, helping our people that are in the community understand that it's not you that's the problem, right?
I love that. And I love how you kind of touched on the parents. It takes them a little bit of time to process, right? It might not be right away. Might be a switch later. But let's talk to parents, how parents can support their children. So let's say the child comes up and hasn't fully maybe come out and said this, but is questioning, just having questions about their sexual identity, their gender identity, and they need someone to talk to. They come to their parents. How can a parent support them? Because this is new for them too, right? So
100%. And, I will say for all of our parents out there, if that does happen, and when it does happen, pause. Before you say anything, just pause.
Hit the pause button.
Right? Hit the pause button in the mind. Remember, you may kind of feel like a deer in the headlights. And I think that's a normal part of parenting, right? Because it's not just, looking at, coming out of a child or, a possible questioning of, gender transition. But this also happens, if a kid comes home to you and tells you, hey, I'm in my first relationship ever and I really love this person, right? And as a parent, you're kind of sitting there, I don't know how to respond to that, right? Or maybe it's an older teenager and the older teenager comes to you and says, hey, I just had sex for the first time. And as a parent, you're kind of sitting there, I don't really know how to answer this, right? So we're not supposed to have the answers of everything, but the best thing we can do is take a pause, allow your child to just share what they're feeling, share what they're thinking. And if you don't know exactly how to answer, saying, I love you, and I'm glad that you felt safe enough to tell me, right? I love you, and I'm glad that you felt safe enough to tell me. And that works with pretty much anything. I mean, if your child has sex for the first time, that's a great response too, right? Because you're going through these kind of feelings of, right? And so are the children too, right? It takes a lot of vulnerability, a lot of vulnerability and courage for a child to come to a parent and say, hey, I'm gay, right? Or, hey, I might kind of be questioning my gender. I don't know if I really feel the same way on the outside as you on the inside, right? It takes a lot of vulnerability. And so parents to take a pause, then be able to say that, right? I love you and I'm glad you felt safe enough to tell me, right? Another thing that kind of comes from that is you can also take it a step further, and ask your children, have you come out to anyone else, right? How can I best support you through this? Right? If you are kind of, on the other part where maybe there's a question of wanting to change names or gender, showing up and supporting your child and saying, I'm not going to be perfect at it, but I'm going to try, right? Because your children don't expect you to be perfect at it. They just want to know that you love them and that you support them, right? Keep in mind that they may have already had peers who have had different experiences where families have pushed them out or they have been unable to be themselves. And so it's really scary for a child to come up to a parent and share this with the possibility that I could lose my family or I could lose, these things based on seeing other friends. It takes a lot of courage and vulnerability. And so, asking them, have you told anyone else are you ready to come out to anyone else? And maybe they're not ready to come out just yet, but they wanted to tell you, right? Asking them, making sure that you're supportive and understanding of where they're at, right? Because they may not have come out to other people or they may not be ready, right? Maybe they felt safe with expressing this to mom, but maybe grandpa's another story and maybe we don't want to express that to grandpa right now, right? So making sure that you're also asking more questions to your child to understand, right? Ask with the want to understand and ask with curiosity and not with judgment. Right? Kind of showing up and asking those questions with the curiosity, with the want to understand, with the want to support, and not that judgment that may follow. And yeah, it's okay to admit to your children that I don't exactly know how to handle this, but I love you and I support you.
I think that's a great point, because I think as parents, we want to solve problems. It's just kind of in our nature to like make it better, quick fix. But I love that you're saying it's okay to not have those answers and to ask questions. Maybe instead of giving the answers, you're asking the questions. So I think that's really important, because we don't have to have the answer and be like, we're gonna make this perfect for you, and it's gonna be an easy. We're just here to love, here to support, and I think that totally hits home.
Yeah, and also for parents to kind of check in with how they're feeling internally, right? So when the child, comes out and comes, to a parent with these curiosities or questions or thoughts, or, they're developing and they're figuring out who they are, right? A parent may also become dysregulated. So that's important to also think about as a parent, right? Am I feeling emotions because of what my child just said? Or am I feeling emotions because I don't know what to do with what my child just said, right? So being able to check in with yourself and kind of take that pause is important, and regulating how you're feeling, right? Kind of working to kind of calm down that within yourself. Sometimes there's instances where children come out to parents, and parents are like, kind of their first thought is, oh my God, you're going to have such a hard life in the future, and I don't know if I'm ready for that or what that means for me, right? And so it comes from the space of love, with some parents being like, I don't want you to have this hard life, right? And so as a parent, that might feel scary inside, right? And the first instinct may be to be unsupportive, because there's fear there about your child and their future, right? So taking a step back and asking yourself, are these emotions coming from my own fear, not exactly how I feel about what my child just said? And so that pause is very important. That's why, even if you don't 100% know what to say, just saying that, I love you, and I'm glad you felt safe to tell me.
What you just said about their parents' own fear about their future, it makes so much sense, and it got me thinking. I've also been curious if you've experienced a lot of parents confiding in you that maybe they feel afraid for their child's safety in school or in the world. I mean, especially in our community, there's a lot of animosity around this topic, and I'm wondering how you respond to parents, or what you have to say to parents out there that are just feeling scared for the safety of their child.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. There is children that parents that do feel worried about their children when they have expressed these differences or individual pieces of themselves, and there is fear, right? Especially because the world isn't always kind, and a lot of times the world isn't kind, right? You see that with anything, right? There's always going to be somebody in life that may look at you differently, just for your culture. It could be for your skin tone, could be, for your gender. I mean, it's always something, right, with that kind of comes that way. And so when I talk, and I have experienced this where, parents do come and they are worried about what it's going to look like for their child, right? And during that time when we're working together, and, I'm working with the parents of my kiddo, is kind of processing their fears, right? Looking at, okay, what is we afraid of? What's the worry about it, right? And then asking them what they want for their child, right? Kind of looking at when there is a question of gender identity, or there has been a coming out from a child, they've come out to their parent. I ask parents to take out the label of gender, take out the label of sexual orientation, and just focus on your child and focus on what you want for them, right? What do you want for their heart? What do you want for their soul? What do you want for them to internally feel like, right? Most parents will say, well, I want my child to feel supported. I want them to feel loved. I want them to feel strong. I want them to be free to be themselves, right? And when I have parents kind of look at that, okay, how do we help your child get there? Right? Because there always will be unkindness in the world. And to say that it's going to go away would be a lie, because it's not going to, right? But asking parents to reflect on what they want for their child's heart, right? Not something on the outside, but internally. And what do we do to help them get there, right? So if you want your child to feel supported and to feel loved and to be happy being their individual self, how can you help them do that, right? And if what you're doing, is it adding to that, or is it hindering that ability for what you want for your child? And I think that most of the time you'll see some change there in perspectives, right? Because we all know that we can't change the bad in the world, right? I mean, I guess one must exist for the other to exist, yin and yang, right? So we know we can't change that. But helping, parents understand that their child is doing exactly what they wanted them to do, which is be themselves, be happy, be loved and supported, and also encouraging parents to look at the other part of the world, right? Because yes, there's a lot of unkindness, but there's also a lot of kindness, and there's also a lot of love, and there's also a bigger community that will accept and wrap their arms around their child and to help them look towards that direction, right? Because ultimately we want, children to be themselves and to feel secure who they are, and majority of parents want to support that. They just may not always know how to.
And I think you kind of, lead into this great idea about the community being there, right? So we can talk to parents and say, this is, how you support your children. But even if we don't have kids, or even if we're not, confronted with this, we still, I think, feel we have an obligation as a community to do the best we can and to show up for the kids, adults, everybody else in our community. And hopefully, I think we're getting there. I hope we're getting there.
We've made strides and progress, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of movement. I think in each generation that has passed and changed, there's been some level of adaptation. There's been some, higher of acceptance, and I do think we're moving. We move in the right direction. Sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back type of thing. But there is so much support around us. Right, we need both sides to exist in terms of the unkindness and the kindness, but trying to filter out those unkind things and be, within our community. I think it's also, it can be important and can be helpful for parents to look at their child for other factors of themselves, not just, their gender, not just their sexual orientation, not just, what they're talking about in the community, right, but who they are internally. Oh, that is my funny child. Right? That is my silly child. That's the child that cheers me up after I've had a really tough day, right? That's the child that makes so many friends and they love my child. That's who your child is, right? Not their gender, not their sexual orientation, not their pronouns. That's who your child is.
I love that. I love you saying that. That's, I actually don't even know what to say. I mean, I just think that's such a huge statement to make, and that's something that we really need to drive home, right?
Yeah, bring that back.
You have the funny child, the quiet one.
Yeah.
And they're all so different, and we love them each for those individual traits, right?
Exactly. Yeah. What do you think for like school programs, community programs that might be out there that parents can get involved in, kids can get involved in, or any resources that might be here, whether it's in Boise, throughout the whole Idaho community?
There's some really great things out there, guys. And it's not just Idaho. I mean, there's some that are nationwide places to go to, right? For both our, our queer youth and for their parents, right? So there's a lot of organizations, there's the It Gets Better project. And so It Gets Better is about, I love what it says, it gets better, because there is an ability for that to get better, right? Once a child is in themselves and feels themselves and they're supported, life can be beautiful, right? And once that support means everything to help you get there. But the It Gets Better project has a lot of things on there, to resources to be able to look at for queer youth themselves, if they have any questions just about, gender identity or pronouns, and the same thing for parents. So it also has information for parents to help parents understand, what their child is going through. Maybe their child is identifying as non-binary, and parents are like, I don't know what that means, but I really want to find out and I want to support. Going to, It Gets Better project, they have information about what each pronoun is and about, how a parent can kind of work through that. Human Rights Campaign's another really good one. HRC, if you've ever seen like an equal bumper sticker on somebody's car, that is from the HRC, which is Human Rights Campaign. And they have a lot of information even like some good blogs and articles about how to talk to your children who, my child just came out. What do I do? Right? Articles like that can help parents kind of process that. I think it, can also be helpful for extended family members and kind of, dealing with extended family members that maybe don't align with the same perspectives as you do. So if a parent is supportive, a parent may have, older siblings or family that is not supportive, right? And what does that mean for that parent and that child and that family dynamic? And so there's some really great articles on there too to be able to read on how to, what are some tools that I can use to be able to combat this, right? The Trevor Project is really good too. They're a pretty big, really big thing, preventing suicide in the LGBTQ community. And so the Trevor Project has a lot of resources and information as well. There are so many, each, like, even if you were to break it down to like each city and each state, they all sort of have their own, many of them have, shouldn't say all, but many of them have these like individual allyships and programs that they have in their city that promotes, LGBTQ wellness and allowing LGBTQ community to be seen even in the months without pride. Right. So these programs are working hard. They're working hard every day to show up for our youth, show up for our community. And it's so important, I would say, also that for parents, it's a great thing if you're wanting to show your support for your children or show support for the community. It can be something as small as putting an equal sticker somewhere on your wall, something as small as putting a pride flag or a pride symbol or something that symbolizes, hey, I'm a safe person, right? You'll see stickers that also say that. They say, I'm a safe person, and there's, colors that represent each individuality. And that even on its own is such a great thing for children to feel accepted and to feel safe enough to come to their parents, right? That something as small as that can make a really big difference. So I just crossed my mind.
No.
Thought I'd say it.
Talking about acceptance, there is the risk that parents, don't accept it. Mm-hmm. But what is the risk to the child if it's not? I mean, I love, like I said, you hit the pause button and think about it, and you don't have to have all the answers. But, if a parent's really having a hard time struggling, what's the alternative? Mm-hmm. What's the risk of not showing up for your child? Because there are, there are very mm-hmm. large risks. We see it here in Idaho, quite often what Grace, also faces with her, she does suicide prevention training mm-hmm. with you doing, with you and counseling and stuff. That it's a reality.
Yeah, it is. It is a reality. And I think, when you look at, take any relationship, right, between a parent and a child, right? Children who have stronger connections, supportive households, and, you look at the different parenting styles and, you kind of look at those that fall into more of the, authoritative parenting styles. Children grow up and they have close connections to their families. They feel supported by their families, right? Children that don't have that, so maybe children that grow up in, traumatic households, maybe children that grow up with, unstable parents, children that, are kind of bounced throughout foster care, they grow up and life is usually a lot tougher, right? Especially for the internal, right? That's the same thing that happens to children when they are not accepted by their parents, right? Again, our beginning social piece is our immediate family, right? We grow into the world as a little baby and our eyes open, and right at the end of the beginning, we're learning what's safe and what's not safe, right? Who do we trust and who do we not trust? And all the way up, right, you're watching your child grow. That is becoming their social piece. That's like their primary framework. It's the framework of the building, right? The groundwork of the building. And when a child is rejected by their family and their parents, that whole thing crumbles, right? What happens if the framework is not strong enough in a house or a building? It falls. And that's exactly what happens with the children. Their entire world as they knew it crumbles, right? And so, especially for children that are still developing, still trying to figure out where they belong, still trying to figure out who they are, right? This is why children's favorite songs change from one day to the next, and when they're on this artist, and then they like this artist, and maybe this person was my best friend, and now they're not my best friend anymore. And it's because there's so much change, right, and fluidity that's happening in that development stage. They're already going through so much trying to figure out where they fit. For their parent to say, I don't accept what you just told me, and I think it's horrendous, and no child of mine is going to be like that. You've just shattered their entire existence. And I think, sometimes what parents don't recognize is that you have taken away, one, their ability to communicate with you, because it takes so much vulnerability and courage to share that. You probably won't get anything else out of them for a while, not ever, unless you are able to backtrack and kind of grow yourself, right? You've kind of shut down that communication, but you've also taken away the only primary space that they've known, and you've stripped it, right? So then we see a rise in depression, right? The higher risk of something is wrong with me. I am an abomination. I'm horrible. I don't want to live anymore, right? The want for a child to complete suicide is a lot higher because of that, because they've lost everything they've known, right? And I think also with gender and sexual orientation and anything else that a child, it's very fluid, right? Like I said, the songs change. I've had kiddos who maybe have identified as part of the community at one point, and they're like, I don't know if I'm really a part of that community. I'm an ally now, but I think I fit more, with the heterosexual community or with the straight community, right? And they're like, but I'm an ally now, right? So things change and they're fluid and they work around, and your children are becoming themselves. This is why I say, if you can manage to take away the label of the gender or the label of whatever, you don't understand it, that's fine. You don't understand why Becky was best friends with Susan and now she's not anymore, that's fine, right? But just saying, I love you, and trying to just look at who your child is and what do you want for them. Because if you want for them to be happy and supported and loved, I'll tell you one thing, telling them that you don't support them anymore because of who they've decided, air quotations, to be, that's not going to help them feel loved and supported, which means you're already kind of going against what you want for your children, so yeah.
You brought up a really good point in the fluidity, and that children do change their minds, and gender identity and sexual orientation isn't this rigid box that we have to fit inside. And while you were talking previously, before you said that, I was thinking about, what about parents who think, oh, this is just a phase, they're going to grow out of it, and how we respond to that. And I don't know if you have more to say about that, or just the fact of what you've already said, that it is it's fluid, and those changes are okay, and maybe they happen, maybe they don't. Yeah.
I'm just, I'll get much closer to the mic here. If you think it's a phase, just don't say it, okay? So if that's what you feel and think, okay, maybe that's going to help you be able to better support your child. Maybe it'll help you to better stay in the now. Just don't say that, right? Because what that ends up doing is it ends up invalidating your child's perspective on who they are, right? So that's like, a child coming to you and saying, my favorite color is blue. And you're like, no, it's not. It's not blue. You just totally invalidated that their favorite color is blue, right? So if you think it's a phase, if you feel like, okay, they might just be experimenting or exploring, just don't say that out loud, because that'll kind of crush and invalidate that and cut off communication, right? There's so much fluidity that happens in growth, but especially in the child development part, right? Remember, they're trying to figure out who they are, and they are also figuring out their own individuality, and in a sense, trying to find out where they belong, right? And so with that comes doing things that maybe, maybe now they're trying to, I don't know, maybe now they're trying to sew. They never sewed before. Now they picked up a new hobby and they're trying to sew, right? Because they're trying to see if it belongs with them. They're trying to see, does this fit me? Do I like this, right? And that's the same thing that's happening with anything, right? You can call it a phase if you want to yourself, or you can look at it as a biological developmental stage, which is I'm trying to figure out who I am and what fits me, right? So yeah, I think that would, supporting, showing up for your child, letting them know that you love them, letting them know that you hear them, trying to learn a little bit more about what it is that, you know, they're experiencing. You know, I always say kind of bridging that adult world with the child world, right? Any of my families that have worked with me have heard me say that. And the reason is because the child world operates very differently than the adult world, right? And even though we can all say, well, we were all children one time, yes, right? But we weren't children at this time, right? And it changes. It's very different. And so bridging that gap of trying to get to know who your child is today, right? This is why when your child comes to you with a new artist that they love, maybe you want to take an interest in who they are, just asking what their artist is, who they do, even if you hate the music, right? Maybe you'll be there kind of dancing all kind of squirmily and, you know, embarrassing your child, but you're taking a want and a curiosity into their world, right? You're trying to enter their world, enter their space. And that's, you know, the same thing here is that we don't know where their gender identity is going to fall or where their sexual orientation is going to fall. They won't know that until they become, you know, solidified more in adulthood. It can fall anywhere on this spectrum of fluidity, right? But just looking at who your child is now and growing in that bond of who they are today, even if you think it may not last, right? And if you think it's a phase, it's not going to last. That's fine. Maybe that helps you be present, right? Maybe think of it like I don't know, you know, it's a cartoon phase or something, right? Example, right? If you kind of go back to that of like, well, maybe it's a phase. Let that help you be present for today. And just don't say that because that wouldn't be a very good thing to say because it'll cut off that communication. And you know, by also doing that and sort of like running with that mentality, you might actually find that actually perspective of yours may change, right? That maybe you'll really love and enjoy who your child is today. And that maybe you won't be questioning about it as being a phase anymore. You might just reach a level of acceptance. We don't know that unless you let it happen, right? So.
Oh my gosh, I've had like chills. I'm not kidding in this whole like discussion because it's just like the way that you put things into perspective or that you explain things and it's just so relatable. I think not just parents, I think that friends and family and aunts and uncles can all take something huge from this discussion and learning a lot. I think you've given a lot of great takeaways and great points. So, but I would like to know if there's like, you know, the one big takeaway that you would just love for people to hear today of what you're saying, what you're hearing from you, you know, what would that be? Putting you on the spot.
That's a hard thing.
I know.
Because I think so much of it is so crucial and so important. You know, but I think the biggest thing is that your child is the exact same child they were before you knew this information about them. Now you've just become a little bit closer to them because they've let you in. But they are the exact same child they were the day before, right? Something changes sometimes when children come out and they speak to their family member and share that all of a sudden this rigidity of parenting happens, or it's like all of a sudden something's wrong. Your child has been the same child. They're not any different, right? They've just now, they're now sharing and expressing a part of themselves with you in hopes that you will still love them and accept them. This isn't anything new to them. It's been with them, right? I think that's the biggest thing is that, just knowing that your child is the exact same person they've always been. And if you look at just what you want for your child in terms of internally, right? When they grow up and they become an adult, what do you want them to say about their childhood, right? When they look back and they say, oh yeah, you know, I remember when I was young and I had blah, 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 right? What do you want them to say, right? Do you want them to say, you know, oh, I remember when I was coming out for the first time and I told my parents and they were extremely supportive and loving and it was really hard that day, but I was there with them and they were there for me. Or do you want them to say, it was the worst experience in my life. I shared it and all of a sudden people that I loved and cared for abandoned me.
And that could be a trickle-down effect, right? If someone has a positive experience, then they know somebody else or a friend that might come out. They could be like, listen, I went through it. My parents were positive. But if they say, oh, I don't know, maybe you should, I didn't go well for me.
Yeah.
you know? And so I think that like parents making the decision to be there for their kids, it's just everything trickles down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like the butterfly effect that we did at Pride,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What you say affects one person and it goes.
Very true. Yeah. And like love, I mean, love is infinite, right? In the sense that you want to be able to love unconditionally, right? Loving your children just as they are, who they are, you know, who they are at that time in life, right? Like I said, everything changes for children. You know, you may have a child that's like really tomboy, and then the next time they're all girly, and they're like, I love my dresses, I love my pink, and they're like, you're like, oh my God, we're in a different place. I don't know who this kid is. I need to get to know them, right? It's about like engaging with your child and getting to them who they are at this time in life and just loving them. Because, you know, love, security, safety, connection, that's going to help your child become an adult and say, my family loves me. Even when I didn't know I could love myself, my family loved me, right? That's going to help your children carry so much farther in advance. And sometimes taking a step back and looking at that of, you know, what do I want my children to say and do when they grow up, when they get older, when they look back on their childhood, because they will, as all of us do, right? What happens when they're adults and they look back at their childhood? What do I want them to remember about me? What do I want them to remember about how they felt here, right? I want them to feel safe. I don't want them to feel like they can't live anymore, that they can't exist, right? So I think that's an important thing, is just understanding your child is exactly, you know, who they've been 10 seconds ago before you knew that information, and just taking out those labels and just focusing on who you want your child to be internally, and who they are. Again, right? My funny child, my strong-willed child, you know, my smart child. That's who your child is, right? And focusing on that piece and what you want for your child when they get older, because it will matter, right? Another thing I would say is that if parents are listening to this and maybe have already done some of the recommended don'ts during a coming out phase, right? Apologize for it. It's okay to go to your child and say, hey, you know, I don't like how this went down, right? I'm sorry that I said what I said and I didn't have information that I have now. And I had my own reaction without working through it. And I'm sorry for that. But I'm here now and I want to support you. How can I do that? Right? Because even though this may be something that had happened in the past, your children are still holding on to that. It doesn't just go away. So parents can apologize. Parents are not always right. Sorry, guys. I know some people would really believe that, but parents are not always right, right? Adults are not always right. We do not know everything. And so children deserve to be apologized to when something maybe an adult or a parent or even, you know, an extended family member did, that they're looking back at and saying, man, you know, I really hate that I did that, right? It's okay to go back and apologize for it. Your children will understand. Yeah, they will. Your children will be happy that you acknowledged it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Everything you said, I just think it's so great. And I love that you talk about supporting your child through everything that they do and are and building that foundation of trust. Because I think sometimes during these conversations, we just think of a big event like this, like maybe it's coming out or like you said, having sex for the first time and how a parent might react to that, but it's really also the foundation, as you said, that's been built prior to that to make them comfortable enough to do that in the first place. And I just think you brought up such great examples of ways to show up like that for your child, whether it's that they found a new artist that they're really into and giving them that time of day to show that they can trust you with that and that you are passionate about it because they are. I think that's a really beautiful message.
Yeah, it's
Thank
almost
you.
it's like a privilege, right? It's a privilege if our kids confide in us
To join
and tell
the
us
world.
about, you know, whether it's coming out or having sex or, you know, if they're coming to us and telling us that, yeah, that's a real privilege.
Yeah, definitely. and you get to join the world, I think
You get to be
is a
part of it.
privilege, you know, because it's already hard enough to talk to your kiddos once they become it. You know, I always say that the 12, you know, age 12 to 14, 11 to 14, the hardest age ranges, because there's so much happens and shifts. You know, sometimes you'll see a kiddo that's like 100% attached to you, and then all of a sudden they hit 11 and 12 and they're like, I don't know who you are and I don't want to be next to you. And you're like, dude, what happened? We were so close, right? Children already go through so much transition and change, just developmentally, right? So the fact if they're even able to come to you and want to tell you this, right? And this, I mean, this goes for any, and we're focusing, you know, mainly on youth, but even as adults, as we move forward to the lifespan, right? Sometimes you have people that don't come out until young adulthood, right? If they're coming to you as a child and you're their parent and they are expressing this to you, that is a privilege, right? Because they're saying, hey, you're important enough to me to want to keep you in my life. And in order to keep you in my life, I need you to know that this is who I am. You matter so much to them for them to want to share that with you. And yeah, it's important with what you do with that information, because it is a privilege and it can be taken.
Wow. I mean, I think we could talk to you like all day.
I could talk all day.
I know. But unfortunately, we don't have all day. But yeah, we really, really appreciate you coming in and talking about, you know, the hard topics, but they don't have to be hard topics.
Yeah.
I think that they could be just great conversations to have. I think you've given our listeners so much to reflect on, to think about. I know me as a
That's
parent.
the hope. Hope
Yes,
so.
for
Food
sure.
for thought.
And we will definitely put the resources that you've given us on our website, so that people can go there anytime. And then you guys can, you know, they can check out those resources whenever needed.
Yeah, and Savannah, we'd love to have you back on in the future if you are interested.
Cool. Yeah,
and so
I'd love to.
For everyone listening, if you have any questions for Savannah about this topic or any other topic related to mental health or youth mental health, please leave them in the comments, send them through our website, and we'd love to have an episode where we can answer all those.
Yeah, please do. That'd be wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Savannah.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Make sure to keep an eye out for episode 3 coming July 2nd. For more information on the Mindful Mike and the Children's Home, visit children'shomeIdaho.org.